Hey, got a quick word for you today. I just got through doing a live, and in it, it was stemming from our studies. And in my studies in Numbers chapter number 13, as I was reading today in verse number 1, it talks about how God said, I've already given you the promise. God has already given us everything concerning every exceeding precious promises that pertain to life and godliness. And there's other promises He has just spoken to you, for you, over you. What happens in Numbers chapter number 13 was like, y'all go on and assess it, check it out, so we know how we about to come up with our game plan to make this do what it do, right? And so they get there, and instead of them just assessing, they end up getting, a cluster of grapes so big that it took 2 men to carry it. Those kind of things like He taught them. But when they get back, what they end up saying in verse number 26, it says they presented themselves before Moses and Aaron, the whole congregation. They reported it, and they showed them the fruit. Then they told the story of their trip. In verse 27 says, we went to the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. There are some of you did get to preview the promise, and you're like, oh God, like it is everything that you said. But what ends up happening is they say, just look at the fruit. The only thing is, this is not the time for you to, the only thing is, this is not the time for you to, God, I'm not sure. This is not the time for the but and. This is not either for the time for other people to tell you, and to put off their fears on you. This is not for time for you to take those on, because literally those things can cost you from walking in everything that God promised. And if you're like me, you don't want to live in the plan B of God. You don't want to live in the consolation prize, if there is one of God. What ends up happening for them, they didn't end up going back to Egypt into slavery, but those that didn't believe, they ended up dying off in the wilderness. I've come too far to come this far. And I just believe, God, that there are those of you, it's time for you to take everything that the Lord spoke. And so what ends up happening is this: in verse number 30, Caleb was like, he interrupted. This is not the time for you to be being polite. Sometimes that lioness, it's time for it to war. There's a time where we a lamb, a sheep, and there's a time where it's time to be the lion. And this might be one of them times. And so he was like, bruh, sis, no, that's not what we ain't gonna do. He called for a silence, it says, before Moses, and said, let's go up and take the land now. The time is now for you to take what God promised you was yours in the first place. That's what this was all about. In the beginning of the chapter, God was like, y'all go on ahead and check that out, or what the land that I'm giving you. You are being given it. Like, whether or not it's yours is not even a matter of the question. And so let us not be ones to forfeit what God has spoken, what God has promised. So he says, take the land now. We can do it. For those of you who have been unsure, who have felt like things were insurmountable, because that's what it says at the end of the chapter, they felt like, they were grasshoppers. They felt like they were being looked down upon. Feelings is fickle, and they also can be real fake. This is not the time for you to give into your feelings or your emotions. Even fear is an emotion, right? And so when you feel fear, there's the spirit of fear, but God has not given us that. Matter of fact, it says 365 times in the word, God has not given us the spirit of fear, and it's saying fear not, do not fear, that kind of thing. One for every single day of every single year, to be a reminder that this is not the time, this ain't that. And when you've been made perfect in the love of God, you know that you can do anything. I love this. Dr. Faith Wacoma said this at one point. She said, fear is believing in a future with God absent. If you know that God is with you, God spoke this to you, God promised you, why on earth would He not cause it to come to pass over your life in Jesus' name? So let us make sure that when we are seeing our future, we're not just visioning what we can do, but we see the God who can make all things possible in Jesus' name. Not what could go wrong, what can go right. What is He ordering to go right over your life? You are not one that is going to be moved by your feelings in Jesus' name. Let's go up right now. You can do it in Jesus' name. Go after everything God gave you, that He promised you, and leave nothing on the table. Because the alternative is they didn't finish. They ended up dying out and went to somebody else. May that not be your portion. The next chapter, they were like, oh, if it's going to be like that, like, we'll go up. And God was like, I ain't going with them. Go on ahead and tell them they go up if they want to. I'm not going up with them. They're going to die out. And sure enough, they went, and a lot of them got it handed to them. They got it handed. So may you seize the moment that God is giving you. See it and seize it in this hour, because it belongs to you in the first place. and God is not going to leave you out there by yourself. Trust him. Take the leap. Take the risk and see him bring it to pass in your life. In Jesus' name. God bless. Talk soon.